Thanks for joining us, everyone. This is a very exciting podcast. It's the first ever True North TV podcast going out live. Well, not live, but going out on our YouTube channel. And my name's Ollie. I'm the media specialist at True North Adventure Cruises. And today we've got a very special guest on. We have the actor, producer, director, Myles Pollard on the show, and he's going to be talking about his experiences on the True North, because we were very lucky we had him join us on one of our Kimberley Waterfalls cruises early last year. So Myles, how are you?
Good, mate. Yeah, it's an honour to be the first. It's like one of those stage plays you do, and you end up doing the very first production, and so your photo and your name goes in that little penguin script that they publish, and like that to me is the ultimate legacy experience. You do the play and then you look back in the book and you go, oh wow, I was in that play. I was the first 20 years ago. Man, amazing. Yeah. This will be one of those experiences.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's the pilot, the True North podcast pilot, and there's a bit of serendipity there, because we're going to be talking about the pilot that we shot with our good friend Mike Fletcher when we were on the Waterfalls trip last year. So we are hoping to get a documentary series made about the True North, and we had to shoot the pilot, which came out really well. And as amazing that experience was, I don't want to jump straight into that. I want to kind of find out a little bit more about how you got into the whole acting game. Because for me right now, I feel quite I don't know, a little bit I wouldn't say nervous, but it feels strange. I'm normally on the other side of the camera, but for you this is kind of second nature.
It's second nature, but it's always an anxious situation. You know, the hardest part is doing home and away. Like home and away, you'll be on. It's really fast. So you have really dense scripts, so lots and lots of lines, a little rehearsal period. And you can hear yourself now?
Yeah.
So you've got that self-consciousness going on.
Yeah.
In a studio shoot, you have foldback. So I can hear in the studio the reverberations while I'm doing a scene. So they'll call action and everything goes quiet. And you've got multicams, you got your lapel here, you got a boom, everyone's looking at you. And then you hear your lines often enough echoed through the studio. So you have this heightened sense of self-consciousness going through it. So you go through this whole process of trying to calm your mind, calm your heart rate, so that you can be present and play, which is a real one of these situations, because, you want to be free and play, and yet you're so exposed. That's probably what you're feeling right now, Ollie.
A little bit. I feel a bit exposed. Is that something like you kind of... they teach you at drama school, or do you pick up your own like little tips and tricks on how what works for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they don't teach you about how to stay calm in a situation, or it's when something is changes, which is a bit of a segue back to the True North. It's when everything's fine, everything's beer and Skittles, when it's predictable, when you know what you're doing. But as soon as a schedule changes, as soon as you've got a new actor that you haven't worked with, suddenly they want to cut lines in a scene, or they want to do it in a completely different way, or the location is no longer available, then your nervousness jumps up. And I think you learn that, you adapt to that by experience, I think, by doing it. I mean, I've had some horror stories where...
Yeah, well, when we first met, I remember we were on that drive up into Paynes Fine, and you were telling me about some of these experiences you'd had playing Shakespeare. I think it was at the Sydney Opera House.
Yeah, that's right.
And you'd you messed up your line, or you forgot your lines or something. It sounded...
No. What happened? I think it was opening night, and it was The Winter's Tale, and John Bell was directing it, who's an icon, the John Bell Theatre Company, Bell Shakespeare Company, and big opportunity at the Opera House, a legacy venue, lead role, the whole bit, playing a schizophrenic king. And then backstage going, oh my God, I can't do this. There's all these people out there. Oh, I forgot my line. What's my line? I can't. What's my line? I don't know my line. And the light, on top of the doorway goes green. It goes from red to green. Green meaning walk out now. I don't know my line. Walk out, facing the audience, and there's something happens as soon as you plug into the audience. Boom, you're away. And then you don't have the luxury of thinking too much about it with Shakespeare, because the pace almost dictates the performance. So you can't actually sit back internally. You've got to be really active, imaginatively, playing each idea in the text, each line, honouring each thought. And so as soon as you start doing that, as soon as you go through that process, you're present, and all the lines, they just flow, they come out. But I remember there was a mate of mine in one of those performances, and he, in the very opening scene, he totally dried, so he couldn't recall anything. He had a panic attack. So he starts just rattling off stream of consciousness. So he just starts rattling off isolated words, and then I ran, and the sky, and the fear, and then the mountain, and everything, and went, and then suddenly the rain, and we're all just going, I don't remember this line. Yeah. And we're all watching him like a train wreck, going, what do we do? And then I think myself and the other lead lady jumped in and quickly segued into the next scene. So that's not the position you ever want to be in on stage in front of 500 people.
I can't remember. I might have read this online, or it was possibly talking to you. But I heard that when you come off stage from like a live theatre production, a lot of the actors, you yourself, you told me that you would like be awake for hours, and you'd have to smash loads of beers to be able to get to sleep because of the level of adrenaline that had built up in you over the course of the performance. And I think it might have been you that told me that they've measured that amount of adrenaline. It's similar to that amount of adrenaline that enters someone just before they're in a car accident.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I don't know who they are, this magical category of people that measure these things, but apparently they did tests on the amount of stress hormone, adrenaline and cortisol that you produce, and your heart rate goes through the roof. And actors, creative types, you're on a high. You finish the show, and then you go to the bar and you have a few beers and you celebrate it, and you spend the early hours of the morning just absolutely wired, trying to come down from that high, and you do it consistently. So if you've got a long run, 6, 8, 12 weeks, managing that is key. It's really important. Yeah, wow. I mean, acting, from what I can tell, I've known a few actors over the years, and just like the whole lifestyle, the career paths, it's just full of knockdowns, highs, lows. How do you deal with that mentally? I mean, that's got to make you so kind of resilient, because it could really play with your head. I mean, I know when if I make a video for True North and someone comments on it that it sucks, or one of my mates say, oh, why have you put that shot in it? It plays on my mind, and it kind of cuts me. But talking to you, I know you've had a lot of sort of big highs and big lows, and how do you deal with that? I think there's a sensibility that I've got, which is being glass half full. I've always been a positive sort of personality type, so I always look at something at a negative situation through rose-coloured glasses, try and find the positive out of it. I don't know why. I think I'm pretty resilient. I mean, it cuts you to the core. I mean, you do it. You might do 12 months and have some knockbacks, but you try 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, where you get close to a lot of big jobs, and then you miss out on these jobs for 9 times out of 10 for reasons other than your own mistakes. Yeah. It's to do with casting, it's to do with timing, it's to do with your haircut, how tall you are, how big your nose is, all these different things. So you become a bit of a realist. I mean, I found for me being proactive was the best sort of panacea to that. Sitting around a phone waiting for someone to give you a job. I mean, actors are at the bottom of the barrel in terms of the hierarchy, in terms of the power structure, unless you're an A-listed actor, and you've got that sort of weight. But most people, you're down at the bottom. Yeah. So being proactive and creating your own opportunities, and to try and generate some confidence and self-belief. And then the weird thing happens is when you feel that sort of I suppose, purpose, and then that infects your auditions and your relationships with people that are casting, and then this sort of perpetuates and you get more opportunities. So it's trying to navigate the downs and trying to turn them into a positive to try and create opportunities. I mean, it took me about 15 years to work that out.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of people never work that out.
Yeah,
So-
you spent your whole childhood, didn't you? You were moving around the northwest,
Yeah.
through the Kimberley, through Wyndham and areas like that, which obviously made the trip on the boat that little bit more special for you.
Oh, it was definitely a homecoming going back up there and seeing an amazing country. I felt I felt connected to it for sure.
Obviously, everyone knows you for McLeod's Daughters. What was the transition to get onto that show? Because that would have been, you know, that was obviously a highlight in your career. Would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was retrospectively, you know, you can say, well, it is the most successful Australian TV show ever made in terms of its overseas sales. I mean, it was the last TV show in Australia to be shot on film. It was big budget. This is the Kerry Packer days. You know, I think it was around about $500,000 back in the early noughties, an episode a week, which was a lot of money. But at the time, I had been involved in a few TV shows like Wild Side and Water Rats and All Saints and little bit parts, lots of theatre jobs and things like that. But I was making ends meet working in a veterinary wholesale factory. Yeah. So I was walking up and down these aisles in this big warehouse, just bagging steroids and, you know, antiseptics for hippos, dogs, cats. And so I had auditioned for McLeod's. This opportunity came up along with every other actor, sort of my age group in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, whatever. And I got a text from my agent. I was just, man, it was a hard job. Rang my agent, got the job. You've got this gig. You've got to go to South Australia. Before that, they want to send you by train to Bowral in Western Sydney for 3 weeks to learn dressage, to learn how to ride horses. They'll pay you X, Y, and Z for that, which was more money than I'd seen in my life. To go and stay in like a 5-star bed and breakfast and ride fancy horses and learn how to you know, move it forward and backwards. Wow. And then within...
I hate horses, man.
Really?
I'm terrified of them.
What's that?
I don't know. They're so big. They're so unpredictable. They're always like butting and biting and hoofing.
Mate, they know. Horses know. I really believe this. They have this intuition. They can smell your fear, like literally. Yeah. They know what's going on. Like if I was shooting McLeod's Daughters and I'd been to Sydney for a weekend and I'd had a few beers and I had a lot of late nights, the horse would not be comfortable with me. It would bark and it would move. But if I had a weekend, you know, of fitness activities, surfing and eating vegan food and whatever, bang, I was just connected with it. It almost knew. So I think they're really intuitive.
Same as all animals, really. Dogs are the same.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's the best part. I love the horses, the motorbikes, the stunts, all that sort of stuff.
All the alpha stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, learning dressage. What's that like? I mean, they're those funny horses, like what they called. I always call them mincers because the way they kind of walk, they have those like funny hoofs that flick up.
We didn't have any mincers. We had quarter horses. Yeah. They're a very masculine horse, not very mincy, but it's the same stuff. Like what you're talking about is dressage in a competitive arena. Yeah. And the basics are the same. It's, you know, it's using your seat, sitting down, using the way in which you sit in the saddle, using the thighs to squeeze in to make the horse move backwards or forward, releasing the reins. It's positive reinforcement. It's horse whispering. It's rewarding the horse for good behaviour.
Frisian, sorry, that's the name of the horse.
Isn't that Frisian a cow?
Frisian horse, yeah, that's the ones that I call them mincers because they look like they're mincing around with their hoofs. But
I've never heard of a Frisian horse.
Yeah, they walk funny.
Yeah, right.
But they use them a lot for dressage. That's what I was thinking of.
The funny walking mincy Frisian.
Yeah, I was just having visions of you sitting on this Frisian
with my waistcoat,
mincing around with your leather chaps
and my monocle.
But yeah, I mean, tell us about McLeod's. What was that time like?
Well, this is the thing. We were a little immune because we weren't living in this Sydney-Melbourne bubble. So, I mean, this is the days before Facebook, Instagram, none of that social media. I mean, you go and do Home and Away now and all the actors are online posting caliber suits or, soft drinks and whatever and getting a nice little $5,000 to $8,000 kicker.
Nice bumps.
So everything they're doing is about about this cabbage. But back then, you'd do it conventionally. You'd do an interview on the radio, or you'd go and you'd speak to a new idea journalist. But because we weren't in the bubble, we weren't aware of the popularity. We weren't really. I mean, I was living in Gawler. I was living out in the sticks. I was going to rodeos and things. I mean, the rodeos. Sometimes there was over 10,000 people, and they'd put us in the back of a ute. Aaron Jeffries and myself, we played brothers in the show, and they would drive us around this arena, which was just thousands and thousands and thousands of people who were just fanatical fans. So that was crazy. Yeah. But generally speaking, we were outside of all the hoo-ha. Yeah. And the critics sort of canned it because it was, the show was it was fantasy. It was unashamedly sentimental. It was romantic. It was, it was actually ahead of its time in many ways because it was about female rights and equality and creating really strong female archetypes that could do the jobs that men always thought they could only do. Yeah. But it was still a fantasy romantic show, so it didn't get the critical acclaim. Yeah. But it got the popularity. Which was a sort of a double-edged sword. Okay. But mate, it was an amazing experience.
Because then you left that show, or the show ended, and then you went to the States, is that right?
Yeah, I went to America and with my girlfriend at the time who was living with me, who's now my wife. Yeah. And I mean, I hadn't auditioned for anything for 5 years. Yeah. Because I was a 9-to-5er on a really hectic TV show. So suddenly I'm in America with an American accent, doing multiple auditions a day, scripts, reams and reams of exposition of all this dialogue to learn. And I just got absolutely murdered. Really? It was so stressful. Yeah. And I remember sitting in the car park before some of these auditions going, I can't do this. Really? It was really tough.
What were you auditioning for? Anything that kind of went crazy?
I've come close to a lot of things, big things. I mean, the CSIs and the, what else? Lots of different shows. I mean, I could write a book on all the shows that I came second in, but we won't go. Right. That's another show. Yeah. But it got to the point.
What were the standout ones? There must be a few shows like you turn on Netflix and then you see some guy who looks just like you, and you're like, fuck.
No, the biggest crossroad I ever had was Lord of the Rings. Oh, so wow. I got shortlisted for the role of Faramir, which was David Wenham got that part. Yeah, okay. So there were 10 people that had callbacks. There was me. There was David Wenham, there was Val Kilmer, there was Ethan Hawke, Myles Pollard. And I knew, and it took me a long time to get this callback, and I knew I smashed it. I knew I fitted the archetype of Faramir, this warrior king, right age group, the whole bit. And then I was doing Shakespeare at the time. I was doing a Bell Shakespeare show, so I was travelling around Australia doing Shakespeare. So I was feeling pretty good, pretty confident. And I turned up to this callback, and Peter Jackson was in the room, and his wife Fran, who does all the writing, and they sort of collaborate. Heavy hitters, you think now what they do, and so I was pretty nervous. So I walked into the room, and for the callback, knowing that I was on a shortlist, and the first question he asked me was, "So what did you think of the books?" I haven't read it, mate, but if I get the gig, I'll absolutely research it. And I just watched him, and he looked to his wife, and they both went, and it was the biggest lesson of my career. I mean, in my mind, I was like, well, I'm working, I'm busy.
Yeah. When am I going to read
It's not one book, there's 3 books, and they're about that thick. Yeah. But he was looking for someone who was connecting with the book on such a level, on a mythic level, on a cultural level, on a historic level.
If it makes you feel better, I've never read the books and I've never watched any of the films. I don't like fantasy.
I love it. It's the best genre ever.
I've never watched Star Wars.
It's probably because it's got horses in it. A lot of horses.
It's probably the horses, man. I've never watched Game of Thrones either.
Lots of horses.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, wow, that must have cut you deep, man.
Deep, yeah. Well, I didn't know at the time. I mean, I look back on it, but I remember that look, and I remember that disappointment in their eyes. Now you go into an audition, and it's like, I've read the books, I've done all the research, this is what I think about them. This is why I'm connected to it. And they want to spend the next 5 years of their life somehow connected with you, whether it's editing or doing ADR or the marketing of the whole franchise. They want to make sure that you are absolutely connected with their motivation.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it?
It's massive.
That process.
And they don't teach you that at acting school at all. But hey, that's okay. We move on. It's just, what's the next one I missed out on?
And so how long were you in the States for?
I was in the States for about 3 months, 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, okay.
Been back a couple of times.
You like the States? I love the States, man.
I love it geologically, geographically, the nature, Yosemite, California, Death Valley, all those things.
Yeah.
The people, the traffic. I'm not a big fan. I'm not really a city sensibility type. I mean, that's the thing. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, we just packed up and we went on a tour of California. We just went everywhere. Went to Mammoth Mountain and Death Valley, and that's what really got me going. And it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you look at the True North stuff, the stuff that, destiny or whatever you want to call it, where it pushes you, things that you're attracted to. Yeah. And it's always been nature. It's always been the environment for me. I don't know if sitting in a city like LA, if you want to crack it over there, mate, you've got to be there for years.
Yeah, you've got to be dedicated.
You've got to have money. Yep. You've got to have visas. Yeah, you've got to have the tenacity and the commitment to go the long journey. I mean, when you start adding children to the mix, it's hard. Yeah, it's a hard gig. I mean, you can be as idealistic as you like and as positive as you like, but the reality is, it ain't an easy journey. No. I mean, even I've got friends that are living in LA, but they were going back and forth. They were single right up until their late 30s. They were fancy free. They had, that they got all their legals sorted out, so they had no commitments in that way. Not taking anything away from what they've achieved, because a couple of them are brilliant actors and really successful, but they were in a different place for that. And so maybe deep down, it just wasn't my cup of tea. Yeah. And so
you then came back to WA?
Came back to Sydney.
Okay.
Lived in Sydney for a bunch of years, doing a whole bunch of different jobs. The odd TV job, the odd film. And then started to develop a film called Drift. So
that's right.
I put my producing cap on. So that was the first thing I ever produced. Yeah, wow. Which was a real eye opener.
Yeah. So how did you come up with the idea for that? Did you write the script for that, or you just came up with the whole concept? That
I met a guy in America, actually. So my brother, who lives in LA now, he was living in New York, and I was in New York, and he said, "Oh, you got to meet my mate, Tim Duffy. He's a producer over here. He's an Aussie. Go on," and he's spent a lot of his time down in Margaret River. He's a surfer. So I went out and had a beer with him, and he was talking about this script that he'd written called Drift, which was a story about these two young surfers in southwest WA who create the pillars of the modern surf industry, loosely based on the whole rip curl, billabong, quicksilver thing. And so we had a chat, connected. He said, "Mate, help me make it. Produce it with me." And I went, "Oh, man, I can't produce. I've never produced it. It's easy. Let's just help me facilitate it to get it up. We've got to get attachments, and we've got to put selling documents together, and it's going to be a long process." I didn't think it would take 7 years.
Wow, 7 years.
Yeah, it took 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, from go to woe. And it was just wrought with ups and downs.
Yeah, and shooting that around the southwest, did you shoot the whole thing like in that region, or did you fake a bit around different areas of the country, or was it all around the southwest? 'Cause I mean,
predominantly was in the southwest. Yeah. So Margaret River, we shot in Nannup, a bit more inland. There was also a second unit sort of a component where they had to travel across the Nullarbor. So I think there was some stock footage taken of the car travelling. But 99% of it was all down in the southwest. Yeah. And then the idea was initially, there was a lot of pushback from my producing colleagues not to do it there because it was more expensive.
Okay.
So
just because it's that much more remote.
it's more remote. I mean,
Yeah.
it's WA too. WA, what's that? 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And what are we now? 2019.
19.
It was 2010, I think. So 9 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, you have to bring in a lot of the other departments.
Yeah.
So you've got to fly them over. You've got to put them up.
And then you got to get them
Then down
there.
south.
Yeah.
So it all adds up.
But what a coastline! I mean, we've just been
mate.
doing those the Southwest cruise on the True North. We've done it 2 years in a row now, and it's just phenomenal. Like the landscapes. I mean, I've hung out in the Southwest a lot. You know, living in Free, I go down there as much as possible. But yeah, to see it looking back from the ocean, it's just such a powerful landscape. You know, those big swells that come up from the Southern Ocean, and you know, it's got that coldness in the air. You know, you feel like, you know, that cold air coming off the Antarctic, but the bright blue skies, and it's such a contrast, like the Kimberley. You know, it's like really contrasty, like visually.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a great place to go.
And
shoot
there's a
feature
rawness
film.
to it, right? I mean, you got big animals. I mean, the Kimberley's got big animals too, but the Southwest, you've got those migratory whales that come past really close to the shoreline. You've got massive sharks, size of submarines. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, I like surfing down there because you don't feel like you're number one in the food chain. You know, you feel like you're actually a part of the food chain. I know that sounds really quite masochistic, but it's sort of empowering to know that, hang on a second, I'm just an organism sitting out, teabagging out here. But it's all in here. It's all fear.
Yeah.
You know, and the media perpetuates all those myths. But I love that part of it. I mean, that's why I like the Kimberleys. Not that I'd go and sit out on any of those waterways. I think I'd prefer to be taken by a shark than by a crocodile somehow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I reckon it would be a bit more...
Less brutal.
a bit more instant. I don't think you'd know much about it for great white game, but
No.
crocodile, I think
I reckon with a crocodile, with a shark, you'd be over pretty quick, especially with shock. But with a croc and the way they grab you and they roll you and then they store you, and all those elements don't make for great viewing.
But how awesome is it being up
mate.
close to them?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I'll never forget that, actually, doing my first barramundi fishing expedition. And
was that with Hawley?
Yeah, it was with Hawley.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there and we'd caught a bunch of barramundi, and he said, look over there. There's this, you just look like a log, you know, but then it gets closer and then it gets closer. And I was leaning over the boat, sort of. He goes, nah, mate, in you get. I said, why? He said, you don't want to be doing that. These are top apex predators. You know, they haven't been around for millions of years for nothing.
Yeah.
They're incredibly intelligent, they're incredibly strategic, and they're very patient.
Yeah.
So they wait for opportunities. That he told us some of those stories, and just the feeling of that, knowing that, again, that you're sitting in that environment.
Yeah.
It's safe, so safe, but the potential is exhilarating.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a number of years guiding up there, taking guys fishing, and I always found that, you know, the bigger the croc, the more sort of docile they were. You know, like it's the young ones, the teenagers that are out to prove themselves, that are smaller and don't look as scary. Those are the ones that I learned through moving through those waterways, that you have to be a little bit more cautious of, you know, because, you know, they're the ones that would come up to the fishing boat, and, you know, you'd see them sitting off the back of the outboard when you're pulling fish in. They're always the ones that kind of made me move on to the next spot. But those huge big ones with the big like black heads, they're just dinosaurs, man.
Yeah.
Like, they're an amazing creatures to watch in their natural habitat. It's
And
really special.
What a massive habitat. I think that was the other thing that bewildered me, and it was awe-inspiring, was the scale, was the size. I mean, okay, you read about it and you know, okay, the Northwest is big. But when you're travelling through it, and you're seeing it, and you're watching the landscape change, and you don't see one boat, and you don't see another person, and this goes on for days and days and days, and then the guides tell you there's no way in to this coastline by car, so the only way you can see it is on the boat. I found that that was a highlight for me, is knowing that I'm in. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years in that landscape. I hope it all stays as pristine and protected, so other people can enjoy that experience.
Yeah.
Because that experience, to me, is the gold out there. It's the remoteness, the isolation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing with that region, I mean, I remember one of our old chief officers, Mick. We were all sitting around having some beers one afternoon, and Craig, the owner, was there. You know, Craig's obviously pioneered the Kimberley. You know, he was one of the first commercial venturers up there. You know, he was like, you know, using the same charts that Philip Parker King was using to navigate his way through those waterways back in 1987. So he knows the place pretty well, better than most. And I remember Mick, you know, he'd done, I don't know, 4 or 5 years on the boat, and he was like sitting around having a beer. He goes, "Yeah, I think I've got this Kimberley place sussed, man." And Craig, I'll never forget, he just looked at him and he goes, "You'll never get it sussed. You'll never get it sussed." Because it's such a big expanse of area, and it's so radical how much it changes with the tides, and you know, the geology and everything changes. And you know, even now, you know, like I'd say most trips that the guys do on the True North, they're discovering new fishing spots, new things to go and look at, new areas of you know, of rock art or different water holes, and it's a constant adventure. It's like you never actually. It's always giving.
Well, that's the thing in a modern society, 2019, and you can still go and explore places that have never been seen. Now that to me was crazy. Like, you remember that spot? Was it at Melaleuca Falls? I think, for the heli picnic, or was it the other place where the rock art was in that cave? We flew into that big ravine through the desert, and we landed on top of the waterfall, and then we had a picnic was set up with all the marquee and all the lamb rack and all the beers and wine. It was beautiful. But then you said, come for a walk, and we walked across that tributary, which was vertical on one side, and the expanse was, I don't know how many football fields. I'm guessing about 10 in its scope and size, with sheer cliffs on either side. And I was sitting in this little cave, like a little nook like this. I thought that's what you got me to see. That's what you brought me to see. And I was watching it, just blown away by it, mesmerised. And you said, "Mate, look behind you." And I looked behind, and he had all that art. Yeah. So 40,000 years of rock art. Yeah. That moment was just crazy to know that someone had sat there, potentially tens of thousands of years ago, with potentially the same sort of perspective. I love that. That to me is what it's about. It's about that you can do that in 2019, is find a place like that that most people, 99.9% of people, can't access ever. Was crazy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that I don't think you could ever like go to anywhere in the Kimberley and have the exact same experience twice.
No, I find the True North experience is about that. It's about really giving yourself the permission to go and explore places, but also explore the cultures and the people that existed in those places.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I suppose, we're kind of touching now on the pilot we've shot. And I guess like most people that'll be watching this won't have seen it. But so let's just talk about how that came about. From my perspective, I was kind of always fascinated with lots of the history that went on in the Kimberley. Obviously, being a guide up there, you kind of have to know a lot of the stories, so you can pass that on to the guests on board and whatnot. And that story of the mermaid tree with Philip Parker King always kind of fascinated me. And I remember we were sat having a beer one night, and I said, "I've got this idea. I reckon we should get a boat with no GPS, no radar, sailboat, and we'll chuck a modern day, Master One skipper on it, and we'll film a reality TV show about this guy trying to navigate with a sextant all the way across the top of Australia and into Careening Bay in the Kimberley." But I wanted it to fake the boat sinking, so have it like filling up with water, have people manning the bilge pumps, like physical, actual bilge pumps.
But like a modern boat.
A modern boat, yeah, and film it like a reality show.
To replicate the PPK's
what happened
experience.
with the mermaid.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And it was a bit far-fetched idea that, I don't know, it would probably be quite interesting.
It would have cost a bit in terms of your liability insurance.
Yeah, and it had all the potential to completely fail and be a waste of time. But yeah, then we got chatting and we kind of looked at that story in a bit more depth and decided to turn it into like a factual documentary shot in the same style as the series Coast, which that's we're jumping forward a bit, but how did it happen from your perspective? Like what was it that kind of sucked you into that story? Because I mean you kind of jumped on board and got excited about it before you'd even been on the boat, which was great. It was
yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it was the fact that I knew nothing about it. And I didn't know that. I mean, for me, I knew about Flinders, and I knew that Matthew Flinders was a bit of a legend, a legend in terms of charting a lot of the coastline, and especially the East Coast. And I made a lot of, assumptions about that and the West Coast. And then learning that there was this guy called Philip Parker King who, like you say, he went around the top end and he had a leaky boat, and he was thousands of kilometres from anywhere in uncharted territory, literally uncharted territory, and then careened his boat at Careening Bay and managed to, tenaciously fix the boat, which was rusting away it was rotten. All the nails were all rusted away, and then get his boat off that mud bank, which had sunk into the mud bank, which was another feat. He was being encircled by Aboriginals at the same time. And then get himself out and then come all the way around WA and then decide, hang on a sec, I'm not going to go back to Botany Bay. I'm going to go up to Timor or Indonesia. I think he went straight after. But the heroics of that in terms of the accomplishment was crazy because I had never heard about that. I'd never heard that story before.
Yeah.
And then, so it's a fantastic idea because it's new. It's like, well, what else don't we know?
Yeah.
All these little gold mines of history that no one knows about. And it was a Western Australian story. He pretty much charted the entire West Coast. It wasn't Matthew Flinders. I thought that was a great concept. And to do it on board the True North, which there's so many parallels. The fact that the True North, like you were saying, Craig Howson in the 80s, that's not long ago, was using Philip Parker King's charts and maps. Literally, no one had been up there and trying to navigate that brutal environment in a really shallow drafted boat, going up these river systems, exploring these tidal regions and all the flora and fauna. I thought it'd be a really lovely little, little counterweight to Philip Parker King's story.
Yeah, like a juxtaposition.
Yeah, juxtapositioning, just showing a modern day explorer and comparing and contrasting with that of Philip Parker King on board this sexy boat called the True North with a helicopter and 5 tenders with all the luxuries. 6 tenders. Yeah. What did I call it before? Adventure cruise ship.
6 adventure boats. And an EC-130 helicopter.
That's right.
I guess that the seed was sown in my head when I was making the documentary about Craig for our 30-year anniversary. And I had to interview like 17 of his kind of friends and past co-workers and family members, and I interviewed this guy called Dan Gregory, who Craig first went up to into the Kimberley with back in '87, and Dan had a business where he would drop fuel on a I don't know why he was going up into the Kimberley. I can't remember. He was taking fuel to a fuel barge, I think, that was then taking it up maybe to Truscott or somewhere like that. I don't know. It was to do with delivering fuel. And I met this guy, Dan, and Craig's like, you got to interview Dan. He talks like a pirate, and he's awesome. And he was a real character. And it was him who told me that they first went up there in '87 and they were pushing the boundaries just to go and find fishing spots, because Craig originally wanted to just get up there and find spots to catch barramundi, and they were using Philip Parker King's charts because that's all they had. The region is still completely unsurveyed. I mean, we've obviously surveyed.
So
was
he using GPS? Not back then.
He had
limited GPS.
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, very very basic unit, and obviously radar. Radar. Was his only. Was his safest means of navigation. The radar never lies, whereas GPS can put you, several meters out of position, which in the Kimberleys, could be disastrous depending on what the tide's doing. So yeah, this guy Dan reckons that he went into King's Cascade up in the Prince Regent River for the first time with Craig, and he said he distinctly remembers the look on Craig's face. Craig would have been, young. He would have been in his 20s, I think, back then, and he was, he said he just saw this change in his whole face. His face lit up, and he knew at that moment that was it. This was his place.
Probably the exact same reaction Philip Parker King would have had.
You'd think so, yeah.
I mean, it's the magnificence of that place. It's just mind bending.
Oh, it is. I mean, I've lost count how many times I've been into that waterfall and seen the boat do its thing, putting the bow underneath the waterfall, and I'm never really there in the moment. I'm flying drones and running around with steady cams, but it still just blows you away. It takes your breath away. I mean, how was it for you when you first saw that waterfall, King's Cascade?
Well, it was a lead up too. And the names I might have forgotten, but you know how we were escorted by the tenders?
Yeah.
Up the river? What was that river? Before we get to the mouth, and then we had to wait for the tides to get into that little area.
Yeah, that would have been King's Cascade. It's the Prince Regent River.
But it was the preamble before, so there was this build up.
Yeah.
Here we go. What's happening here? The tenders are in front of the True North. Why? Because it's very shallow, and so they need to guide this boat. This shallow drafted boat. So the drama had already begun, and then with the tides were optimum, and then we went in, and we got closer and closer and closer, and then closer, and then closer, and then before you know it, you're actually up against the rock face. So the drama was off the charts. So I remember trying to take photos, and my wife and I were talking, and we put them down because the experience was so magnified, it was so heightened, and everyone was out the front on the bow of the boat watching this unfold. So the energy was it was ecstatic. Yeah. And then we're underneath the waterfall, and it's not like it's just a little dribbling waterfall. No. I don't know how many.
We'd had a pretty good wet season that year.
It was one of the best in years, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I think the year before there was a little bit more, but yeah, it was decent. It was really decent. I mean, the King George was looking pretty spectacular that year. I mean, how good was that heli flight?
The King landed? George, I reckon, is probably, to me, is the zenith of that whole trip.
Yeah.
Don't you reckon?
Oh, it is. It is. I mean, it's great because you either start your trip with that one,
right?
So
on
it's
the way
like
back.
if you're doing the trip from north to south, that's day one. You wake up with that waterfall, and it's like, whoa, we're here.
Yeah.
Or it's it's the jewel on the crown, as they say.
Yeah.
You finish the trip with that, and it's just.
Well, we had the luxury of having the helicopter, and then. Yeah, that day you were talking about was crazy. Standing on that slab of granite, whatever it was. Sandstone. Pretty old rock.
Yeah, pretty old.
Sheer drop, looking down. How
1.8 billion. 180 million years old.
180 million years old.
Yeah.
Standing on that, looking down, sheer vertical cliff face. That was crazy. That was crazy. We did a couple of stand-ups up there too. I remember trying to sum up the series, the episode. It was really quite emotive, quite an emotional moment, standing there, and you had the drone going, talking about everything that had happened on the trip, but standing in that landscape, which just had its own life, its own sort of feeling to it.
How was it like directing, acting, and there was only 3 of us shooting that episode, that pilot episode. How was it, dealing with the landscape, the changing in schedule? What was that like for you as sort of actor, director?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's every shoot has its own challenges. I mean, that one was very challenging because it was all in flux all the time because we were beholden to the True North schedule the whole time. So we had to fit in around the requirements of the True North and the clients on board. I remember standing on the top of, was it King George? It was King's Cascade. No, King's Cascade.
Cascade, yeah.
And we had, by the time we walked up the mountain, which took us about 2 hours carrying all that equipment.
Yeah.
And I had this beautiful big stand up to perform. And you went, okay, Myles, you only got about 10 minutes because the boat's about to sail. So we had the boat in that bay, perfectly situated. Yeah. And by the time we got the lapels on, by the time we got the drones out, the boat starts moving.
Yeah.
So it was like, boom, here we go. I've got to get this in 1-2 takes. So those pressures were amplified. But so was the adrenaline, so was the enjoyment of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you really working, existing on the seat of your pants. It's nice having an unpredictable environment. You've got to adapt. I mean, that's the whole tenet of exploration too, which is a part of it. I mean, we always said that.
I mean, I think for me, like, you know, working on board the True North for all the years, it becomes almost like second nature because the schedule on True North, you know, isn't written in stone. You know, there's like obviously a disclaimer on the website. You know, everything's subject to change due to prevailing weather and tides and stuff, and it really does kind of make you adaptable. You have to be, because you know we write up a daily schedule, and the cruise director kind of, you know, announces it after dinner each night, and it always changes. But 9 times out of 10, it changes for the better. We discover that there's a better spot for fishing, or you know, one of the boys spots that there might be some oysters or something, and a lot of the time, you know, the guides themselves, they'll be out just making stuff up as they go along, and just, you know, that's the magic of not just the Kimberley, but the True North in general. It's just a constant adventure. And you know, when we did that shoot, that's what it felt like for me. You know, it was obviously, you know, it was a bit more stressful for us because we had a shot list and we had all the stuff we had to tick off. But yeah, I just can't wait to do the next one. It was hard work, but a lot of fun. Well, I think we can wrap it up here. What do you reckon, Myles?
Great, Ollie. Thanks, man. That was pretty good for the first one ever.
I reckon we're done, man.
Good job.
But yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
Anytime. Good stuff.